If a video game calls for combat at any point over the course of its runtime, you can generally guess what to expect. A vast array of weapons that are either of the firearm or bladed variety, depending on when and where the action is set, and maybe a few throwable things to mix things up a bit. Not everything is content to stick to that convention, however. And sometimes weapons can come in the form of the most innocuous things. Whether that's because the game allows the player to use anything in their environment, or someone just got a bit silly with it. To that effect, we've gathered together some of the strangest and, in some ways, most boring of items that we could find that are actually usable as weapons in their respective games. Some of them are more effective than others, but none of them are especially weapon-like in general. Just don't go getting any ideas. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are 10 ordinary objects that make great video game weapons. Number 10. A cafeteria tray. Bully. It may not be quite as violent as Rockstar's other titles, since no one has access to rocket launchers, but Bully still has plenty of objects that will help players get up to all sorts of unsavoury acts. Though the most tempting thing to do in Bulworth Academy's cafeteria is to start a food fight. Players can grab the actual cafeteria trays as well, and use them to get up to all sorts of mischief and into plenty of fights. Thankfully, these trays don't have to stay in the room, or at least they can't make you because you're a rebel, and you can carry them throughout the school, using them to smack people about, or giving them a hearty toss down the corridor to hit anyone unfortunate enough to be doing something silly like trying to walk to their lessons. They're not only good to use as weapons though, and can also be used as shields, making them quite versatile and useful to have, especially once all the people you've wronged have decided enough is enough. The only thing they can't be used for is eating, so really, Jimmy's just giving them a purpose for existing. A bad one, maybe, but still. Number 9. Shovel. Shovel Knight. I bet you won't ever guess what the primary weapon in Shovel Knight is. Oh, did you say shovel? Okay, maybe that was a little too easy. You're right, but this is no ordinary shovel, nor is the protagonist any ordinary knight. With the spade in hand, the eponymous adventurer of the NES-inspired title sets off on a journey and can use his iconic shovel not only as a weapon, but as the tool it is usually supposed to be, digging through dirt blocks and uncovering treasures before he turns the point on his enemies. Efficiency. You love to see it. This multi-use implement can be made even more useful as the knight levels up, gaining projectiles and improving abilities that will keep the intrepid hero going for that much longer. As unlikely a weapon as it would typically be considered, I definitely imagine that getting whacked by a shovel is likely to do some serious damage, especially if you're using it to pogo on the enemy's skulls, so it's certainly not the strangest option. But hey, once you've defeated any enemies, you can immediately hide the evidence. Seems like a win-win, really. Number 8. TVs. Silent Hill Origins. It's not really looked back on fondly at this point, but Silent Hill Origins does have a unique mechanic that allows for innocuous items in the environment to become weapons. As you can imagine, this is really useful in the world of Silent Hill, as there are always loads of personalised horrors shuffling around, and ammo is generally rather scarce. One of the most surprising ones that is available to use is a television, albeit a very small one that looks as though it's at least 50 years old. Those CRTs aren't actually used as a melee weapon like you might expect, but instead can be stored in Travis's inventory and carried along to be thrown at enemies. Perhaps because they're so deceptively heavy, the TVs do a pretty sizable amount of damage and can be a really useful tool to use in one of the game's many boss fights. It would be much harder to use them if it was a more recent game though. The only advantage to having a television that weighs the same amount as a gorilla is that it can do some serious damage. Today's TVs only wish they could double as a bludgeon. Number 7. Basketball. Michael Jordan, Chaos in the Windy City. If you've ever been on the receiving end of a very quickly and accurately lobbed dodgeball, you know that getting hit with a sphere meant for sports really stings. Presumably, this is something the developers of Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City were well aware of when they decided to make the main weapon for their odd side-scrolling platformer a basketball. And also the eponymous Jordan was a basketball player. I suppose there is that as well. The story is a tale as old as time. So that he can save his teammates from the mad scientist who kidnapped them, sports superstar Michael Jordan has to gather keys and defeat enemies. In order to do this, he uses his considerable skill with a basketball to navigate each level and rescue his teammates, dribbling and slam dunking his way to becoming a hero. It's not just regular basketballs that can be used, as there are a few special varieties available that will do special attacks, such as exploding like bombs or making the floor a bit slippery. The latter may sound daft, but it's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Actually, do you suppose we could get those in real-life basketball? It would certainly make the matches more interesting. Number 6. A motorcycle. The Yakuza series. The Yakuza series constantly changes things up and keeps players on their toes, packing in all sorts of twists, turns and side content, which, most recently, somehow includes strange versions of both Pokemon and Animal Crossing. They've even drastically changed the combat, switching from real-time rules to turn-based battles as the series changed protagonists. One thing that has stayed consistent despite the combat change though, is the fact that almost any object in the general vicinity of the character can be used to wail on the huge numbers of bad guys that apparently constantly wander the streets of Japan and Hawaii. Many of these seem like fairly reasonable objects to pick up over the course of a fight, such as small road signs and crates. But Yakuza is never content to do things by halves, so even larger things can be used, with probably the most impressive one of all being a whole flipping motorbike. Lifting one of these up and whirling it around will, unsurprisingly, knock down any enemies within range, whereas bringing it down on top of their heads will hurt, presumably. Really, at this point, people should know better than to mess with Kiryu and Ichiban. If they can pick up vehicles like it's nothing, then what chance does anyone have? Number 5. A Mask. The Dead Rising series. Yet another game series that lets its protagonists use whatever they like to take on various threats, Dead Rising has no shortage of surprising items that can double as makeshift zombie repellent. Perhaps one of the most surprising, though, is the many different masks that can be used to help incapacitate the shambling hordes. Each of the games has different varieties that can be acquired, including a range of animals and a few special nods to other games. They can be used as a fashion accessory, sure, but where they come in really handy is when they're placed over a zombie's head. At their most basic, the headgear can be swung or thrown to knock enemies over, but is more effective when slammed atop an undead's head, blinding and essentially incapacitating it. Because how can they eat humans if they have a horrible latex lizard head on? Checkmate, zombies. That isn't the only use they have though, and there are quite a few combination weapons in the game that turn the masks into much more effective killing machines. If the horrible mask smell doesn't kill them, those whirring lawnmower blades sure will. Number 4. A fan. Persona 4. In the Persona series, the most powerful tool available are the titular personas, which allow the protagonist and their less versatile summon-wielding friends to attack the various strange monsters inhabiting the alternate world using a variety of elemental attacks. That isn't to say weapons aren't important though, and each of the teens also has their own personal favourite to bring along with them, most of which fall into a fairly standard weapon category. Yukiko from Persona 4, on the other hand, favours something a little less flashy and a lot less weapon-like. A fan. There's nothing really fancy here, other than the fact that traditional fans can be quite ornate and expensive. She does try to get fancy with her attacks by throwing the fan like a frisbee at the enemies, but it seems unlikely that this would result in anything more severe than a light bruise at best. At the very least, though, there are more powerful options that become available over the course of the game, and do some significant damage, some of which have elemental attacks or knife bits attached. But when the other characters have things like a Zweihander or a literal gun, a fan hardly seems like the best way to go. Unless you're up against an enemy weak to wind. I'll give you that one. Number 3. A broom. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Every protagonist of the Assassin's Creed games has a load of convenient tools of the trade available to them. The most important, at least if you're hoping to get around without being attacked in every street, are the hidden blades. But there is also the option of bigger swords, poleaxes, sabres, and even a variety of blow darts or throwable weapons on occasion. Why then anyone would opt for a broom when this entire arsenal is easily available is baffling. But the option is there, at least in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Even more surprising is the fact that, as it turns out, this improvised weapon is quite powerful, capable of not only knocking down folks, but killing them just as effectively, if not more so, than some of the actual bladed weapons tucked away in the player's scabbard. There's even an incentive for doing so as well, as eliminating a guard with a broom will lead to unlocking the spring cleaning achievement, or trophy if you want to get all PlayStation about this. Seems like the ladies aren't the only ones that Ezio can sweep off their feet. The guards don't seem nearly as happy about it being done to them though. Number 2, a foam finger, the Dead Space series. All of the objects we've seen thus far have certainly been strange, but have been available in the game with little effort needed to find them. Now we come to something that you have to put in a good amount of work for, by completing the story on the hardest difficulty, the various foam fingers from Dead Space. You could say then that this one is a bit of a wildcard entry. How exciting! Known as either the hand cannon or the devil horns depending on the game, these massive red sports accessories have 2 modes, Bang Bang and Pew Pew Pew, which Isaac will helpfully voice as he fires. As ridiculous as this is though, it's really a handy weapon to have. Oh, sorry. There's actually more to that than the joke. Yes, as it turns out, each of these unconventional firearms, or fire hands, as it were, sorry, I'll stop now, actually is so powerful that it will blast all of the limbs off of any enemy unfortunate enough to be pointed at, effectively making it a one-hit killing machine. Of course, if you manage to beat the games on their highest difficulties, it's not likely you need an insta-kill weapon anyway, but at least now you can look ridiculous while killing the necromorphs, so worth it? And number 1, a cardboard tube, Hitman Contracts. Thanks to his training, Agent 47 has the ability to turn almost anything you can imagine into the deadliest of weapons. Probably the place this is truest, however, is in Hitman Contracts, where the besooted assassin can use a simple bit of cardboard to absolutely obliterate his targets, and anyone who happens to be in their flight path. This one is only available in the PC version of the game, and only by way of a cheat code. Probably because it isn't just sort of powerful, it's actually the most powerful melee weapon in the entire series, capable of killing anyone in swinging range in one hit and yeeting them far into the distance. It's clear that everyone in the game knows of the tube's insanely powerful properties as well, because everyone around the Hitman will treat it as a deadly weapon and call in the appropriate professionals to try and subdue Agent 47. It doesn't generally end well for them, but at least they tried. It will also set off metal detectors and can't be concealed once equipped, so there's no pretending it's someone else. Wrapping Christmas presents must be an adventure in 47's house, that's for sure. One wrong move, and you've taken out half of your living room.